risk versus reward. To me, this is one of the most fun parts of game design. And I argue this is one of the most important part of game design, just in terms of making your gameplay interesting, adding replayability, giving your players more choice, balancing skill versus luck to a certain extent. There's just so much that can be done with great examples of risk versus reward. Our goals with this lesson are, we want to define what risk versus reward is. We want to look at some examples of mechanics that allow risk versus reward. We want to analyze some examples too and think about, well, are those good examples of risk versus reward? Here's some more information about risk versus reward. Risk versus reward does not exist if there's no player choice. Because if you can't choose something, then you can't choose safe or risky option. Also, think about in games. I don't have a great example right now, but there's certain choices you can make. Let's say you have two choices. You can do choice one or choice two. And let's say that their consequences are the same and their rewards are the same. That is not risk versus reward then. Just in general, player choice is not risk versus reward. You have to have one option that maybe is safer, but its reward is smaller. And then you have to have another option whose choice, like it's maybe more difficult to pull off, it's harder to pull off, but you get a bigger reward. Let's think a little bit more through risk versus reward by also thinking about New Super Mario Bros. So in New Super Mario Bros, let's talk about, so for example, a safer option would be, let's say you just want to get through the level, you're avoiding the enemies, you don't really care about the coins, you're just trying to bounce through and get through the level, you're not trying to get the coins. So the odds of being successful are a little bit higher. Maybe luck is not as much needed, and it's probably going to require less skill for you to get through that level. If you're not really trying to collect the coins that are going to be in dangerous areas and you're kind of avoiding the enemies, probably not going to require as much skill. Your consequences for failure are not going to be as extreme. Coins, you might fall into a pit or something. That's a big consequence, is falling into a pit. But the reward for success is going to be smaller, or there's going to be no reward. So if I'm avoiding the coins and kind of avoiding the enemies, I'll still beat the level, but I'm not getting any additional rewards for taking that path. So the riskier option, it needs to be, so when you, again, these are goals, like this is stuff for you to think about when you're designing risk versus reward in your games. Let's say New Super Mario Bros. I'm going after the coins. That's riskier because the odds of being successful are lower. The coins might be in more dangerous places, let's say over a piranha plant or over a pit or other dangerous areas. So my odds of being successful getting all those coins is going to be lower. Maybe there might be some luck involved in taking that riskier option. In a lot of board games, for example, rolling the dice is an example that affects luck. Getting all those coins is probably going to require more skill of me. I'm going to have more skill with my controlling of the character to grab all those coins and my timing my jumps. Maybe there's requires more skill in terms of combinations, like I'm thinking of some fighting games. Maybe like in first-person shooters, accuracy. Maybe it requires more skill in setting up a strategy. The more risky option is going to have higher consequences for failure. For example, it might cause death. So Mario might get eaten or fall in a pit. The riskier option probably is going to have a larger loss of health. Might even cause you to lose the game. Maybe you do a strategy. You set up this strategy that's a risky strategy, but it could pay off. Like it could pay off and get you maybe to win the game. But because you took that risky route, it might cause you to lose the game if you're not end up being successful. Or maybe it gives the other players an advantage. The riskier option, it must have bigger rewards for success. So when you do pull off that riskier option and you are successful, you should get some sort of bigger reward. Otherwise, there's no point of taking that risky option. For example, some bigger rewards for success could be maybe you get more points. Maybe you acquire like special items, or maybe you get more items. Maybe it does more damage to your opponent. Maybe you complete the level faster. For example, Mario Kart, you take a shortcut, which might be hard to like pull off, but now you complete that map or that race faster. Maybe it gives you an advantage over others. In regards to like risk versus reward in your game, it's not okay just to come up with a random example and throw it in there. We really want our risk versus reward opportunities to align with our game's core mechanics and our theme. That's super important for making it just the game to feel more elegant and feel like it's just better designed. First example we'll look into, of course, is PacMan, awesome old school arcade game. PacMan can eat ghosts after touching a power pellet. Those ghosts turn like blue and their face change to tell you that you can eat them. And eating those multiple ghosts in a row awards these points that double. First ghost you eat, 200 points. Second ghost you eat, 400 points. Third, 800. Fourth ghost you eat, 1,600 points. In PacMan, what is the non-risky or the safe option in regards to eating the ghosts? The safest option is just to avoid the ghosts. Even after you eat a power pellet, just avoid it. Like, don't even try and get them. So then what's the reward? If you are avoiding the ghosts and you're just running around, what's the small reward? The small reward is you're just eating the little pellets. You're gonna get it's like 10 points or something. Why is it more risky to eat multiple ghosts in a row? It's more risky to eat multiple ghosts in a row because after you eat the first one and then you eat the second one, like the time where they're going to flip back to normal, you're getting closer that they're going to flip back to normal. Once you get to this third and especially the fourth one, if you can pull off eating a fourth one, that's pretty tough. It's going to be very close to the time that they're going to flip back to normal, meaning you're going to be if you're going for that 1,600 points, you're going to be close to the enemy and they're going to be close to, like in terms of time, flipping back to normal and possibly kill you. The reward is high. If you can get 4 ghosts in a row, 1,600 points compared to like just getting 10 points for eating one pellet. So that by the designer, through the points that they're distributing, through the points that they're giving you, they're trying to like push you towards doing that strategy of eating multiple ghosts in a row. One reason why is because it's an arcade game, so the faster you die, the more quarters you're going to want to put in their machine, and the shorter your gameplay is going to be. But also because it's more exciting, it's more fun. If this mechanic was completely gone, if the power pellet was it wasn't in there at all, it'd be so boring. Just going around grabbing the little pellets, it'd be so boring. But because you can pull off and try and do this risk versus reward option, it really makes things interesting. And that's where my argument is that power pellet and eating the ghosts in a row, that connects so well with the mechanics because you're moving the ghost, or you're moving PacMan around, you're eating the pellets, and then when you flip the script and you can eat the ghosts and kind of boom, 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 you eat 4 in a row. That feels really cool to get that 1,600 points. Another example of risk versus reward in PacMan is sometimes fruit just shows up on the map somewhere. And my argument is like that's kind of cheap. Like it doesn't connect as well with the eating the ghost. It's just, yes, it's food and PacMan's running around eating food, but like why is fruit just randomly showing up? So the risky part is, it's risky to go after the fruit because you might have to go where the ghosts are, change where you're going or whatever, and the ghosts might get you. But it's just kind of like a cheap risk versus reward that's thrown in the game. I don't think it's as well designed as eating the ghosts. Burger Time, this is another old school arcade game. And the reason why we're talking about some of these old school arcade games is because they're overall pretty simple. Their core mechanics are pretty simple. You're just kind of moving a character around and usually you only have like one button to do something. And then they usually have like one really awesome example of risk versus reward that really helps define the game. In Burger Time, you play as Peter Pepper. He's like a chef, and you walk around and you make these buns fall. So if you completely walk across a bun or a piece of lettuce or a hamburger part, is you make the part fall. And the way that you beat the level is you got to make all the hamburgers, all the buns and lettuce and the meat parts, they got to fall all the way down. But when you walk over across it, it just falls one level. Another mechanic is if an enemy touches Peter Pepper, he dies. Another mechanic is when, let's say, so this is a sausage, when the sausage is on the bun, so you have an enemy, these enemies are chasing Peter Pepper, they're like running around, they're kind of like the ghosts in PacMan, running around chasing him. If that sausage were on the bun and Peter Pepper walks across the bun, then it's like the bun is heavier. So now the bun's going to fall further down. Instead of just going one level down, now the bun might go boom, it might go like boom, boom, boom. It goes 3 levels, and you get extra points for that, and it smushes the enemy. Let's say you get 2 enemies on there or 3 enemies on there. Now that bun will fall even further, and it will give you more points. So in the risk versus reward, there's more risk versus reward. So I want you to tell me why is this an example of risk versus reward? This is definitely risky because if you're like waiting for the enemy to get on the bun with you, that enemy is going to be really close to you. And if you're trying to get multiple enemies on there, then you might have an enemy coming up this way, and then maybe the eggs come in this way. You might get surrounded. So you're much more likely to die if you're using that strategy, but you have a much bigger reward. And it definitely relates well to the mechanics because you're in the game you're already making the buns and the parts fall anyway. So now that you added the character on there and all the parts fall further and it's kind of like, oh, it's heavier, that makes sense. Pengo, this is another neat old school arcade game. You play as this little cute penguin, and if the enemies touch you, so here's the enemies, these little red guys here. If the enemies touch you, you die. The way that you kill them is by shoving the blocks into them and you kind of smush them. So you would take your little character here, you'd push the button, boom, and you'd smush this enemy in between the blocks, kind of thing. You can get an extra bonus if you beat the level faster, so that's a risk versus reward there. It's risky to try and go through the level and beat it really fast. You might make mistakes if you're trying to play really fast. Another bonus you can get, these star blocks, I'll just call them star blocks. Let's say you can get those 3 star blocks. Let's say you can somehow get them all along this wall. If you can get them all along this wall, then that's going to give you a bonus. Let's say you can get those star blocks all lined up. Let's say right here, just somewhere in, they got to get lined up somewhere in the level. This is another way you can get a bigger bonus. Line up those 3 star blocks, let's say right here, or maybe you do it right here. I don't know. You just do it somewhere not on the walls. If you can get those lined up, you get an even bigger bonus. So why is that risky to try and line up these star blocks? It is definitely risky to try and line up those star blocks because if you're moving around and trying to get those lined up along the wall, that means you're probably not paying as much attention to those enemies. And those enemies are going to be chasing you. They're going to try and attack you and get you. Also, it uses more time. And it's hard to really try and get these blocks out of the way of these ice cubes and to shove them against the wall or get them somewhere in the middle. It's tough to do. Street Fighter, we talked about. What is an example of risk versus reward in Street Fighter? When we were designing our game Cosmotrons, risk versus reward is something I definitely thought a lot about. I wanted to have multiple examples of risk versus reward in my game. So in Cosmotrons, so again, here's our arcade machine. You get 4 people. They're standing at that arcade machine. You're piloting a little spaceship, so you can just barely see little spaceship flying around. And you're trying to shoot other spaceships. Bullets and the ground destroy your ship. So if you took this ship, you ran it right into the ground. This is like a floating island thing, or you flew it into this, your spaceship would be destroyed, or bullets would destroy your ship. You also need fuel in order to fly your ship. And this fuel spawns connected to the terrain. So why is that a risk versus reward example, and how does it require more skill? It requires more skill to try and get the fuel because you have to actually fly into it and touch it with your ship. That's dangerous to do because otherwise you might touch the ground. It's also dangerous to do because the enemy could potentially shoot you. You're kind of vulnerable when you do that. Another example of risk versus reward in Cosmotrons relates to this. So you can shoot normal bullets. You just tap the button, boom, boom, boom. You can shoot normal shots. But you can also shoot a special shot. But that special shot requires you to hold the shoot button to charge it up. It takes like about 3 seconds or something like that. So if I want to shoot that special shot, I hold the button down. It shows like the ship is charging. And in order to shoot that special shot, once it's charged, I just release the button. It goes. And charging that special shot actually uses up a little fuel. So why is that? Why is using the charge shot? And it's just, like the benefit of the charge shot, it's usually like a bigger type of shot and it goes faster. So why is using that charge shot an example of risk versus reward? If you think about it, while you're flying your ship around and you're holding that shoot button down, when you're holding that down, that means you're not shooting. So if you're not shooting, that's risky because then you're not shooting at your enemy. Your enemy has more freedom to kind of fly around. They don't have to avoid your bullets. And it's another reason why it's risky to use that special shot is because you're then consuming some of your own fuel. And the fuel you need to live. The tabletop game Settlers of Catan. Players get resource cards based on various rules. It takes 2 resource cards to build 1 road segment. So here's a road segment. It takes 2 cards to do that, to build at least one of those. The player with the longest road gets 2 bonus points. So for right now, it looks like this blue person, they have the longest continuous road. They would get 2 extra bonus points. And once you get 12 points, you win the game. The points can get taken away and given to the player that ends up building a longer road. So let's say, for some reason, let's say red ends up, let's say they end up building the longest road. Then blue's going to lose those 2 points. Those 2 points are going to go to red. So why does going for the longest road have a high consequence for failure. If you think about it in Settlers of Catan, if you're spending a lot of your turns to try and build all these roads, you're using all those resource cards, and you're really going after that longest road, that's using up resources that you could otherwise use to build like settlements and cities, those types of things. So if you're really like driven to go after the longest road, using up all your resources, and then for some reason at the end of the game, you don't end up getting longest road, your big consequence is you essentially built a lot of roads, but just building roads don't give you points unless you have the longest road. So they wasted all those resources to build a nice long road, but it's not the longest. Thus, they don't get any points. They wasted resources that could have gone to something else. Ticket to Ride, another great tabletop game. Some mechanics to think about here. A player needs the correct color and amount of cards to claim a route. If they want to claim this red route here, that's only 2 red cards. If they want to claim this one here, that's 6 red cards. So on a turn, when it's a player's turn, they can either get 2 cards or they can claim a route. So if they have 6 red cards, then they can claim that route, or if they have 2 red cards, they can claim that route, and so on. Different length routes are worth different points, and here's the scorecard here. So if you get 6, if you lay down 6 cards, and the way you get the cards, they're like face down, and you grab them again, 2 per turn. To get if you get a route that's 6 trains long, that's worth 15 points. And as you can see here, if you just lay down one route that's 1 train long, that's 1 point, and then 2 trains long is worth 2 points. What would be a safe strategy in Ticket to Ride? What would be the risky strategy in Ticket to Ride? Why is that strategy risky? In Ticket to Ride, it can take quite a few turns to try and get 6 of one color. That's why, like, I want you to think about if these mechanics were different. The score is part of the mechanics. If you laid down a route that was 6 trains long, but that was only worth 6 points, let's say each of these were only worth like how many cards they were, there's not really much benefit to try and do a longer route. You're better off just doing shorter stuff. So what they did is the designers realized that, and they increased the amount of points for these longer ones because they're so much harder to pull off, and you're making a sacrifice because you're collecting cards for multiple turns instead of laying stuff down. But the reward is big. When you can pull off getting a long route, the reward's big, and it definitely doesn't feel good when you're trying to, let's say you're trying to pull off this route, but the person before you, like a turn before you, they get it before you. Like that, that's like a oh no moment. But that's part of the risk. That's what makes the game interesting. There are all kinds of examples of risk versus reward in football, and my argument, that's one of the reasons why football can be very exciting overall to watch. That's why it's pretty popular in our country. So what are some examples of risk versus reward in football? Let's go over a couple examples here. So obviously a long pass is a lot more dangerous than like doing some sort of run. If the player's running, you got the running back running with the ball, they got it pretty secure. A handoff is a lot easier to pull off than a long pass. A long pass could potentially get intercepted. The quarterback's got to have a lot of skill and probably some luck in terms of lining that up. You know, there's wind that can affect it. There's all kinds of really neat examples of risk versus reward in football. To sum up this lesson, we definitely want to be thinking about these statements here when we're designing risk versus reward. We saw this earlier. And our risk versus reward options, they should align well with the game mechanics and the theme. They should be well designed and connect really well. They should be interesting. They should be fun. That riskier option should have some sort of bigger reward. It shouldn't be overpowered though. Like that's the fun about game design is you got to play test, balance stuff, and see how it works. Thanks for checking this lesson out.